Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satyaguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome everyone. So we have nearly everyone today here, only with the exception of Roots, it seems. So last week we stopped at how we get trapped in samsara, right? So we have looked into different aspects or features of the self, including the bliss, the limitless nature, as well as the conscious existence. And then after having looked into that, we now move it into the understanding of how we get trapped in samsara. The verse 11 says that if it's not clearly known that the self is limitless bliss, there will not be intense love for it. When it's known, there is no attraction for world objects because all one's love goes to the self. It is difficult to say that the self is either completely known or completely unknown. Well, in any case, even if it is the knowledge in regards to the nature of the absolute subject as the self, or the nature of objects created by Maheshwara, it's always difficult to really know completely any object created by Maya. We try our best to see and understand the world of physical and subtle objects, and somehow, due to this limitation in the jiva's intellect, it's always a little bit, difficult to know even the objects of the field. Every knowledge we have, every object of knowledge is subject to correction, to revision, to error. But here we are referring to the knowledge in regards to one's very self, one's very I. It's difficult to say that the I is either completely known or completely unknown. We know that we exist, we know that we shine with knowledge, consciousness, yet we have a hard time to know this conscious light shining in our intellects due to its subtlety. It's so extremely subtle. It presents itself as the nature of the subject knower. And we know of its presence, and we learn by the connection with the scriptures that it's not only knowledge, it's not only existence, but it is bliss. It's of the nature of true satisfaction, true happiness. So we have the scripture helping us. And then what's left to us is to realize these declarations of the Upanishads and to understand fully what the self is, as Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, and limitlessness, that which cannot be known objectively, but can be known as the nature of the knower, of the jiva knower, the nature, or in other words, the absolute subject, which is not an entity, experiencing entity, It is a non-experiencing entity, let's say, okay? It is a conscious existence principle, the only reality in which the world of objects appear and disappear. So it says that it's not completely known or completely unknown. It's difficult to say. Yes, for almost everyone, it's difficult to say. So can anybody know for sure? Like, I know what I am, you know? We can, but we need to trust the scriptures on that one and know that, yes, I'm sure what I am. I am consciousness, I'm not the mind. I am not a physical body, I'm consciousness, and I am existence itself. And my nature is ananta, limitlessness. So we need to trust the scripture until we realize our very nature, and then we can say for sure, it is completely known to me as my very existence, as my very consciousness, which, by the way, is of the nature of one without a second. It's one consciousness of non-dual nature shining in every jiva's intellect. Because the self, because our self-knowledge is vague, most spiritual teachers and so-called teachings present the self in a vague way. Our self-knowledge is vague. So again, so what it means, our self-knowledge is vague. We know that in the spiritual world, there are a lot of abstract, vague self-knowledge, or knowledge in regards to this self. But our self-knowledge, because in general, let's say our self-knowledge is vague, most spiritual teachers in this spiritual field and so-called teachings present the self in a vague way, particularly as an object not immediately available. Because they present the self as an object, it becomes extremely vague and abstract. It's impossible to present the self objectively. The self can be completely and clearly known as the subject, as the nature of the intellect. Okay? This is a way to know clearly the knowledge of the self-knowledge. But if we see it as an object, and then our knowledge is going to be vague. Why? Because it's going to be all about these very subtle epiphanies or mystical experience as we are searching and seeking for the self, and then the mind develops excess of sattva, and then it starts shining and reflecting all kinds of experience, of subtle objects. And then those extremely subtle phenomena objects, meaning to say epiphanies, they are very, very crazy sometimes. They are abstract, they are vague. We can never really say for sure what it was. You understand? So because they are present as an object, let's say, they are often present in a very vague way, and particularly as an object not immediately available that can obtain in some, but can be obtained in some special epiphany. So that's the way they present. And then they have no way to explain clearly the self, because those epiphanies usually they don't make much sense. There is not much way we can make an analysis of an epiphany. In the same way, it's very difficult we analyze a dream from a very logical point of view. Apart from a legitimate means to actualize self-knowledge, partial knowledge, meaning to say vague knowledge, abstract knowledge, is unreliable and frustrating, which accounts for the fact that so few people realize who they are. So it is frustrating when we believe that the self is an object, is one spiritual, subtle, esoteric kind of object of experience. It is unreliable. Why? Have you ever had an epiphany? If you have had an epiphany, you know how difficult it is to duplicate the epiphany. If you have an epiphany and you say, okay, now I have got in contact with the self. Now, and then I say, okay, now I lost my connection with the self. So I had a contact, I have a yoga connection, contact, but now I lost it. So now I want to do the same sadhana to produce the same epiphany. It's very hard. You understand? It's not under our control altogether. So it is unreliable. If you reduce the self to an object of experience, it is in the nature of every object, the impermanence, it has a beginning and an end. And then you can never really be absolutely sure that the self is with you, because you are projecting the self on a certain subtle experience, so it is frustrating as well, because you feel like, oh my God, I'm doing the same things and I'm not coming to the same end result, because those epiphanies, they are conjunction of several factors, which includes one's subtle mind and one's goal, what one's wants to achieve or project. If I'm totally ignorant of myself, like most animals, I don't have problems. Yeah, because as we know, ignorance is bliss. Have you ever thought, Karen, that cats and dogs and many other, maybe cats and dogs, due to this close association with human jivas, they may begin having some sort of psychological problems. I heard of some places in which they have therapy for dogs and cats. Have you heard about that? No, I heard that there are some places that they have therapy for dogs and cats. So maybe due to this close proximity with human beings, but otherwise, the animals, they have no problem. Why? They don't have this mix of ignorance and knowledge operating. They only have ignorance. They respond to their environment intuitively, mechanically, okay? Naturally, they just respond according to their program. So they are free from any problem. I don't have problems. If I'm totally ignorant like the animals, I don't have any problems, because I have no concept of myself at all. So the ego is not there. The image of myself, you understand? The image of myself that needs to be sustained and protected and defended and so on. I mean, I have the self-reflection, the self-consciousness that produce an idea that I am and I am so and so and so. And then you are never satisfied with the image or the ideas and notions you have of oneself, because every jiva self is limited by nature. It's a mixture of rajas, tamas, and some sattva. So we have ignorance operating on it all the time, and we are subject to many mistakes that brings conflicting karmas, and then we get confused. Oh, am I a good guy, or I mean, am I a real nice, generous, and elegant and and beautiful guy? Or so we get in all these notions, these conflicting notions that we have about ourselves, that goes in contradiction with what the environment reflects back to us. So we need ignorance for problems, but we need knowledge for problems. And ignorant self is required for problems. But ignorance, total ignorance, brings about no problems. We need some ignorance mixed up with some knowledge, okay? It's the twilight zone, the late afternoon in which we have darkness and light operating, and then there is a lot of room for mistakes, okay? And that is the condition of most of us. We live, in this twilight condition in which rajas and tamas, representing ignorance, keeps, pushing back knowledge, and vice versa. And then we have all these problems, because we have enough sattva to know that we know, to know that we exist, and to respond, to a certain extent, intelligent to the stimulus of the field. But yet we are subject to a lot of mistakes, error, and that creates problems, self-image problems, and conflicting problems with the environment as well. If I know who I am completely, I don't have any problems because fullness, limitlessness, one without a second, non-duality is my nature. So I don't need to enjoy, I don't need to gain and keep and push objects so that I can realize and enjoy and appreciate my fullness. My fullness is not a byproduct of the results of my actions in gaining, retaining, and avoiding, but it's a byproduct of my understanding of my limitless nature. So if I know that I am the self, if the knowledge is complete, if the knowledge is not too third, if the knowledge is I am conscious existence and limitless, if my knowledge is complex, and then I know my limitless non-dual nature, and then I know that the objects are in me, and I don't need to run about getting or avoiding them because they all exist within my conscious existence, you understand? And my nature is this conscious existence that which pervades, pervades all objects projected by Maya Ishwara. So I know who I am. I have no problems though, because limitless bliss is my nature, and I do not need to run after objects to establish my blissful nature. My nature is not established by running around, but it's established by knowledge. But a little bit of knowledge, let's say, oh, I am consciousness, I am existence, and a little bit of ignorance. Oh, I am small and limited and inadequate and insufficient and so on. So we have a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of ignorance. If we have knowledge and ignorance operate, and then we have the recipe for problems, trouble, conflicts, because we are confused about our nature to begin with, and then we are always having this intellect, agitated, disturbed, trying to get and gain and accomplish what they want, and that creates a lot of that compromise our discriminating faculty, our intelligence. We get compromised due to our vasanas operating this fundamental ignorance. I want what I want, and I want when I want. A little knowledge and a little ignorance is always a problem. If I do not know I am whole, full, and complete, I will chase objects to gain bliss. So that's how we get trapped in samsara. Rajas and tamas are going to create this projecting power and this concealing power, and then we do not really have a clear understanding of the object in my environment and how to really navigate in this environment, and much less about the true nature of this environment, which is my very true nature. I don't know the true nature of reality. I don't really understand how to behave, how to navigate, how to move around. I was not taught Karma Yoga. I don't have an understanding of Ishvara, much less of Brahman as the substrata of Ishvara. So I just know that I exist and I am an intelligent, knowing being. But that is not enough. That is going to compel me to chase objects because I feel I fall immediately due to this concealing power and this projecting power. Immediately, I don't understand what I am. I don't understand what's behind this intellect, so to speak. And then what I do, I have to define myself. It's almost I'm compelled to define myself. And then I define myself as the body mind. And the moment I do that, and then I'm trapped in samsara because as the body mind, I'm just a machinery operate by my likes and dislikes. And then I keep running to gain and avoid. And this is a never-ending game. So by action, we'll never come out of samsara. By action, will be trapped in samsara forever, as we know. So the only way out is by the means of understanding, knowledge of one's true nature as Sat Chit Ananta. I will chase objects to gain bliss. I will see the object. I will believe that they are real. I will believe that they contain bliss, and I will chase them. But this pursuit will produce much more pain than it does produce pleasure. Believe me. Here it says there's much pain, but the truth is that it produces more pain than pleasure. Why? Because it's difficult to get what you want. There are many people, unless you are very smart. If someone would be very smart, will say, okay, I'm going to enjoy only bliss. Why? Not by knowledge, by gaining what I want. Wow. And then you are God. You can gain really anything you want. I say, no, no. My bliss is coming from the object, but I'm going to desire only things that are freely available. Okay? And then I'm gonna say, what I want in life? I want air. So far, air is still available, you know. I want air, you know. I want space. Okay. So I want water. So if we desire things which are freely available, and then we could be in a situation that we can enjoy bliss, 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 because we are running out of after things that are freely and available to anybody. You understand? But now we complicate our lives. We start tasting a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We are no longer satisfied with the basic elements such as space and air and water, you know. And then when we see we are trapped because our likes and dislikes, you know, what I want and what I don't want, is operating and governing us, and all of that because we mistook the body mind as myself, and then as the body mind I am a machinery moved by my vasanas, my likes and dislikes. Okay, the moment that I assume my identity as the body mind, I'm trapped in samsara. I'm chasing object, and I gain more more pain than bliss, than pleasure, because it's not easy to get what you want. Unless you want things that are very simple, but very soon we are not satisfied with simple things, and we want the specialties of life, and then we're in big trouble. Because the desired objects are not under my control. Sometimes I get what I want, and sometimes we don't. Every speech shows that we have conflicting ideas of who we are. Sometimes we will speak as if we are the body. I am fat, I'm tall, I'm this and that. And sometimes, if we are separate from the body and say, oh, my body feels very heavy today. Sometimes we see the body objectively as if I am the mind. Sometimes I see the body as myself when I say, oh my God, I'm so fat today, this week. No? So the second statement can only mean that I am consciousness. When I see like my body is have today, we either see the body as the mind, which is an option, or we see the body as consciousness, which is a deeper way of understanding the body. Remembering, of course, that consciousness does not really see. When we see the dense physical body, we see as an intellect. To the degree the intellect knows that its true nature is consciousness, and then we can say I see from the standpoint of consciousness, but that which sees is the human intellect, okay? Because consciousness is not a knowing, experiencing entity. The second statement can only mean that I am consciousness because the body is matter, and matter is only other category in existence. There is energy, matter, and consciousness and consciousness. So we must know who we are to some degree, because we always strive to rid ourselves of pain. If the self is misery, nobody would love it. So we know that the self is a source of joy and love and happiness. And we know that because we only strive and we just love. We know that the love we have for ourselves is superior to any other love. Huh? We heard about these movies. Oh, Romeo, Juliet. Oh no, I die for you. No, you die for me. Now the truth is that if it comes down to that, it will say, no, you first. Huh? Will be more realistic. Say, okay, no, I come after you, but you go first. Huh? Why? Because this love for our existence is built in nature. You know, when we are born, we are, we have this love to be. Okay, so we have this love, and we know that we only love things that is a source of joy and satisfaction. If the self was something miserable, nobody would have this love. So the self can only be a source of happiness, not a source of misery. And why we can also understand that every time we are experiencing misery or suffering, we are not okay with it. Are we okay? Oh, I'm having such a great day today, Karen. I'm so miserable. I'm suffering so greatly, No, we don't accept that. Why? We don't accept things which are not natural to us. Okay? That's the logic there. If misery is the nature of the self, nobody would, would love it. But we do not love ourselves consistently when we are sometimes blissful and sometimes miserable. So, this fact that I am fully identified with the body mind, meaning to say, I'm identified with my thoughts, and feelings and emotions. And sometimes I feel like this, sometimes I feel like that, and then I get confused about my true nature. I am of the nature of happiness, or I am of the nature of misery and suffering. The scriptures say that I am of the nature of happiness, but I'm confused because sometimes I experience bliss and sometimes I experience misery. Okay, so I'm not really sure. I feel that this self is not consistent. They say that the self is that which never changes with experience, but I feel that I'm changing. So of course there is a superimposition of the mind, the intellect, the subtle body in the self. The subtle body changes, okay? But the self does not change. As long as our identification is on the subtle body as the body-mind complex, we're gonna feel inconsistent. We will see, oh my God, I'm confused. Sometimes I am like this, sometimes I am like that. I don't know what image to make out of myself. Sometimes I'm very beautiful and loving and generous. Sometimes I'm greedy and angry and irritable. So who am I? You understand? So if we identify with the subtle body, with the body-mind complex, we're going to remain confused about our nature, which is all the time, changing. The nature of the subtle body, the nature of the body mind complex, that we subject to constant change. The fact is that we do not love ourselves consistently when we are sometimes happy and sometimes miserable. We want to be happy forever. We want permanent, infinite happiness. Oh, this is enlightenment. Yes, sign me up. I want to be enlightened because I want to be happy forever. Huh? So we want this forever happiness. These fleeting moments of happiness we pick up here and there when circumstances really conformed to my likes and dislikes, they are no longer enough. We all have had the experience of bliss. We know that this happiness exists, but somehow we feel like, oh my God, but I would like to have it all the time. Well, I'm no longer satisfied with temporary, you know, moments, fleeting moments of happiness, which comes with certain defects attached with to begin with. They are not really perfect happiness. Okay, we are not going to go into that in that matter. We want a perfect, infinite, permanent bliss. Those fleeting, temporary moments of bliss we pick up leads us to believe that the bliss is inconstant. So that's it. That's life. This is it. Life You can be happy, but you're going to have to suffer a lot of unhappiness. And that's the nature of the self. That's the nature of one's existence. Okay? So we have all these conclusions subconsciously, all because we have attached our identity to that which changes. We have attached our sense of identity to that which changes. What changes? The body mind complex. Like anything in medium is subject to constant change. Okay? Or if we have heard that the self is limitless happiness, we may feel that we are incompetent because, oh, there is something wrong with me. I don't know about you guys, but I went through so many spiritual circles. And a lot of the times I was feeling there is something wrong with me here, because these people are going there and sitting in front of Papa G, and then they say, "Yeah, I got it. I am infinite happiness," and so on. You say, "Oh my God, why I did not get it yet?" And these people with these beautiful fake smiles, they look like they are so enlightened, and So if I really am honest with myself, and I know that I don't feel happy all the time, and I don't hide that from myself, and I go into an environment where people say, okay, so we are infinite happiness and we are happy all the time, and everybody starts faking until they make it, but you were very honest with yourself, you feel there is something wrong about myself. You understand? I'm not getting it. I'm the only one unhappy here. No, I experience happiness sometimes. We want to always feel good because at a deeper level, we are good only to the fact that the self is non-dual wholeness business bliss. So the self is of the nature of limitlessness. We need to understand this word limitlessness. Limitlessness is that which is complete. Okay, non-dual, which is synonymous of limitlessness, means to say there is no end, means to say there is a wholeness, a completeness, okay, a fullness. It's one without a self. It's complete, it's whole, it's full. So the nature of the self is fullness, wholeness, and completion. Okay? Once something is complete, there is no room for anything else. There is nothing that can be added, and there is nothing that can be taken away, because the self is of the nature of one without a second. There is no second factor that can go over the fence and pull a little bit of my fullness to the other side. No, there is only one without a second. So the nature of consciousness as such, that is one non-dual principle, conscious existence, limitless, whole, full, complete. Okay? So once we understand that we want to feel good because good is limitlessness. We feel good when we don't feel limited. And again, we can mention that we feel limited. Why we feel limited? To begin with, why we feel limited? Why? Because we want something else. We want something more. We want to be a better me. Well, I want to have a better house, or a better relationship, or a better this, a better that. So we feel limited by that which we wish to have and do not have. We also feel limited by having that which we would like not to have, but we have, like a serious illness. Okay, I can feel limited by having something I do not have. I may feel limited by not having something that I wish to have. And I also feel limited sometimes by having something that I wish to hold, because deep inside I feel that, it's not holdable. It's going to go. Okay, so any of those three aspects of feeling limited is the base of our human experience, and they are all based on the fact that we want something, or we want to get rid of something, or we want to keep something that I feel that I'm beginning to lose, like my wealth, my youth, for example, or my health, as we get old. So we feel that certain things we begin to lose, and all of this makes us feel limited. Okay, so we feel good when we feel limitless, and we only feel limitless when we understand that we are not the body mind with our desires for completion by the means of gaining or accomplishing or having or avoiding. When we understand that our nature is conscious awareness, and it's that which infuses the intellect, the mind, with light, so that I consciousness becomes the knower experience. Okay, so unless we understand that we are not going to feel good all the time, we want to feel good because unconsciously, on a deeper level, we know that our nature is limitlessness, our nature is goodness. Okay, we know that unconsciously. Our nature is eternity, immortality. We don't like the idea of death or mortality because we know unconsciously, deeply inside, that our nature does not begin or end. Okay? It's a limitless conscious awareness. There are no divisions in this conscious awareness. So there is no pleasures and pains. There is nothing to be gained so that I can feel pleasure by contacting something, an object of desire, okay, or feeling pain by contact an object of pain. No, there is no room for that because my nature is consciousness. So although I still, as a Jivan Mukta, as a young, I live in the world, so to speak, we know that there are certain preferences, there are objects, we interact, but still the knowledge regards of my true nature neutralize these energies of neediness, of wanting, of desire, and trying to avoid. All of that can only be neutralized by understanding our nature as that which is always good, because it's one without a second, it is limitless, and it is already complete. It does not need more in order to feel complete. Okay, there is a very nice analogy about the ocean. The ocean is always full, whole, and complete. Okay, no matter how hot the summer may be, how much water may evaporate from the sea, you understand? Nothing can take away its fullness, okay? Because furthermore, the ocean knows that in due time, all this vapor, all this steam is going to come back from the mountains as in the rivers, and bring back in this cycle, back to the sea. The sea remains all the time whole, full, and complete. So likewise, our nature is this fullness. A lot of phenomena happens on this apparent order of reality projected by Maya Ishvara, all within the ocean, and the ocean remains firm and absolutely serene in its fullness and completion. There are no divisions in the self, so there are no pleasures, there are no pains, just a sense of profound satisfaction. Now, this is a touch of Ramji. I know his commentaries. I know how to distinguish when it's more Ramji, when it's more Vidyarani, and when it's, I tend to pick up a little bit of that. And when it's, and when it is Paramarthananda. But this is very much Ramji. There are no divisions. There are no pleasures and pain, just a sense of profound confidence and satisfaction. So this satisfaction comes from a confidence in one's nature as consciousness, that which can never be affected by any phenomenon of nature, you understand? So this profound satisfaction, it comes from this confidence, this certainty of self-knowledge. I am conscious awareness. So this produces this This happiness, which is not connected to any circumstance, any happening, this satisfaction that is beyond, any past all understanding, as some say, as if we are asleep while awake. Have we done this before, or did we do this last week? No? Okay. As if we are asleep while awake. This is a very nice statement. When we were with Papaji here and there, he used to play, to be a teacher. But as we know, he had a lot of Shakti, he had a lot of charisma and energy, and he used to bring about these states of minds and these epiphanies in people, look into his eyes, and there was something really powerful about him. But he was not a real teacher, But sometimes he would present bits and pieces of teaching. And he used to say, when the whole world, be like the yoni, when the whole world is awake, you sleep. You understand? So what it means is almost as if we are asleep while awake. The world is awake, but you are asleep. This asleep means to say you are not affected by the world of object. These energies that push and pulls people's vasanas, do not really operate in the yoni, because the yoni has neutralized. He is not subject to this magnet pulls of attraction and repulsions toward people, place, and circumstance. So it's almost as if you are watching and you are living. You are asleep to the world, meaning to say the world is just a movie now. It does not pull me and push me. It's more or less like that. As if we are asleep while awake. You awake, but you are asleep to the world, this object shining with apparent values, attracting people and repulsing people, and you were just asleep for all of that.
But it seems kind of like content could be another way to look at that.
Yeah.
Content. Rather than we're content, unaffected in that way.
Contentment is a very good word. Yeah. Satisfaction. Ramji tends to like to use the word satisfaction. Contentment. When I first came to Papaji, there was already a group of people around Papaji at the beginning, and then I was like, wow, what is Jesus enlightenment? Because I was coming from a background of Osho origination after 10 years around Osho. When they did it, enlightenment was all kinds of epiphanies and something like that. And Papaji was presenting enlightenment as a very simple recognition. And then I would say, but what is the byproduct? What is the result? How long you were here? Oh, I'm here 2 months or 3 months. Oh, you should be already super enlightened. Yes, how is it to be enlightened by Papaji? And then people would say, it is a sort of contentment, you are just satisfied, you are just at peace. The best word I like to use is shanti, is peace. You are at peace with yourself and the world, there's nothing to be gained, nothing to be lost. You are just enjoying the movie and you are grateful for the opportunity. You are grateful to Ishvara and so on. The purpose of Vedanta is to make clear what is incompletely known. So we know a little bit, but we need to know it clearly, okay? Fully, yeah? Completely, solidly, yeah? Doubtlessly, we need to understand, what the self is. So we need to make clear the knowledge we have in respect to the self, which is incompletely known. So Vedanta is the complete, it's an extensive body of knowledge that allows the individual to know the self as it is in its simplicity and in its ordinariness, as Ramji likes to say. You know? He used this word, ordinary consciousness, to describe the fact that it's nothing transcendental, nothing really spectacular, or nothing extraordinary. Yes, David?
Excuse me, Arlinda, would you let Ruth in, please?
Hmm?
Ruth is asking to join.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, the purpose of Vedanta is to make clear what is incompletely known. If we don't know it, you will keep seeking it, because we cannot stand to be ignorant of anything that we love so much. How beautiful. Huh? So something that when we love something, we want to know it, right? So again, the the very, very most common example is like when we fall in love first, second, third time, you know, and then when we love the other, we want to know it fully. Yeah? And then later on, we regret we got to know it so intimately, you know. But in the beginning, we say when we like something, we want to know it, you know. So if you don't know the self, you will keep seeking it, because we cannot stand to be ignorant of anything that we love so much. We love our existence and we want to know it. This seeking for the knowledge in respect to our true nature is built in every human being. But it takes time for that seed to sprout, and consciously one begins the search for true happiness in one's very nature rather than in the objects proposed by Maya Ishwara. But it's in every human being, it's the search for the self that moves everybody, because every time we accomplish our goals in life, we somehow experience some of it, some of our limitless nature, our happiness, our peace, our contentment is experienced through our success in life, you know. It's not completely known, and it's not completely loved as well, because it is thought to be limited and it's assumed to depend on objects. You know? Again, we took the body-mind complex to be the self, and then we are confused. We keep searching to understand who I am, you know, and I want to know who I am because I love my conscious existence. And it's not completely known, and it's not completely loved. Why? Because sometimes I'm miserable, and when I'm miserable, I don't like myself. When I'm happy, I love myself. When I'm miserable, I don't like myself. I reject that side of myself, you know? So it's not completely known, and it's not completely loved, because it's thought to be inconstant. Sometimes it's happy, a source of happiness. Sometimes it feels miserable. Sometimes it feels like, oh my God, I'm the worst person possible, you know? And sometimes I'm up there, and I depend on the object. I depend on so many things for my happiness. And then we start to say, oh, I don't really care for this love. I'm just going to be a samsari, and I'm going to consume, you know, objects that I can enjoy through my five senses, you know, sensory objects, consumption. I don't want to know about it. You know, more than once I tried to quit over these decades. At least twice I want to totally quit this search for the self. I was so frustrated. I was so tired of it all. And I want to quit it. But guess what? It is impossible. It was too late. I was already, I had already taken this direction to search for happiness within my true identity, my true nature. But it was being so difficult and so frustrating that I want to go back to the world And I want to be a samsara again. I used to say, oh, I just want to be done with it. I want to be back in society, have a normal life, you know, prepare for my old age and retire, you know. But it was too late. I had no longer taste for the experience society was proposing, you know, and then I was trying to I would go back to the marketplace, begin doing some business, trying to get a job and this and that. And then when I see I'm going back to my spiritual books, when I'm sick, and then I'm leaving everything behind and going back to India. So it's worse than the coronavirus. Once you get it, you never get rid of it, you know. It is occasionally known through objects in the form of discrete experience of bliss and satisfaction, happiness, but it's not known for what it is. No? We know that, oh my God, it feels so good, you know. It is existence, it feels so good. Nothing touch. I remember those days, you know, that I used to come out of the satsangs with Papaji or even Osho. There was this feeling, nothing can touch this feeling of I, you know, that it feels so loved and light and, you know, sublime and, you know. So sometimes it feels like, it's such a blissful thing. And I am this experience, and that is the mistake. I used to come out of those states with Papaji and with Osho even before, and I used to immediately identify with that state and say, oh my God, this is the self I love. And then next day I was having some psychological problems. I would say, this is the self I don't like. And I used to miss that I was the light illumining and revealing those two different mental states, you know, a state of bliss and a state of sorrow. So the self is never really known for what it is. That's why we miss it. We never realize that the self is the nature of the knower of that sublime experience, as well the nature of the knower of that miserable experience of suffering. If you know that you exist, you know the self. If you know that you're aware, your consciousness, your knowledge, you know the self. But knowing that your existence, consciousness, is not completely knowledge, as we know, knowledge is complete when it is 3/3 knowledge, not 2/3. When you know the self is whole and complete fullness, meaning to say the self is non-dual consciousness. It's not the human consciousness. The human consciousness is reflect consciousness, which is conditioned or colored by the configurations of one's reflecting apparatus, which is the subtle body, okay? So consciousness is non-dual, it's whole, it's full and complete, and that is the only way we can be 3/3 self-realized and never have any problem or conflict in regards to one's self-image, because you have established your image, you have established your identity in that which is not subject to change, okay? Is always ever present. There is limitless conscious awareness. The subject witnessing non-experienced conscious existence, okay? Witnessing conscious, non-experienced witness conscious existence. So the next verse, anything in regards to the verse 11, or can we move on?
I think it's beautiful.
Glad you enjoyed.
Are you saying then, like, in teaching us that we can't be totally, completely in moksha, that there's always going, as long as we're in Mithya, we're always going to be drawn back into Mithya. We can't be permanently in, with the limitlessness, of self. So that's not part of Mithya. There's no limitlessness of self or pure consciousness in Mithya.
Well,
as long as we're
I'm not sure I understood your question, but limitlessness can only be accomplished by knowledge, understanding of our true nature as consciousness, not as the mind, not as the emotions, not as our intellect with all its knowledge, you understand? It's the nature of the knowing agent called jiva. So our limitlessness can only, ananta, can only be achieved or accomplished by the means of understanding our true nature. And Vedanta serves this purpose, to help us to understand our true fundamental, free and independent of what? Of the body-mind construct and all experience that comes through this body-mind construct. Our nature is that which is free and independent. Consciousness, which is equal to existence, whose nature is limitless because it's one without a second. It's non-dual. It's one single existence, one single consciousness, okay, in which all the jivas are superimposed or project, you understand, including the jiva that we are reflecting upon, producing the jiva atma, doing the inquiry and asking this very question. So limitlessness can only be achieved or accomplished by the means of knowledge, understanding. So what it does is that this limitlessness, this happiness, which is the nature of the self, when we say that the self is of the nature of joy and happiness, it does not mean that the self is a jiva, is an experiencing entity. The self is not an experience nor agent or experiencing agent, okay? So the self is of the nature of true joy and happiness, because when it reflects in the subtle body of the jiva, it produces the same self as a reflection. And this reflected consciousness called the jiva atma, once it understands its true nature as limitless, non-dual consciousness, and then this nature called ananta is translated for the jiva atma as ananda. Ananda is a sense of peace, contentment, and satisfaction, which is not derived by the interaction or the gaining and retaining and avoiding of object, but it comes from the knowledge in regards to one's true nature. You understand? So it needs to be gained by the means of knowledge, and then we can experience this fullness, this ananta, this limitlessness. We call it limitlessness. And why we say that it's the true nature of joy and happiness? Listen, why we say that the self is the true nature of joy and happiness? Because the jiva atma only do, all jivas only do what they do. We only do what we do because we want to experience happiness and joy, you understand? And we do a lot of things, trying to experience happiness and joy. When we say that the self is of the nature of happiness and joy and security, we are saying that for the jiva atma. Not, the self is not an entity feeling secure or feeling joyful, feeling happy or blissful. The self is just full, one without a second, non-dual, limitless. But when it reflects in the subtle body of the jiva atma, it produces the agent, the jiva entity. And this jiva is going to be a happy enjoyer or a miserable sufferer. It will depend on how deeply his identification or no identification with the body-mind is established. If it's fully established in the identification, I am my body, my emotions, and so on, and then the jiva is going to experience a lot of trouble. But if he has this knowledge, in respect to his nature as consciousness, which is limitless, okay? And then that Ananta is going to be translated in the human experience as a sense of peace, contentment, and satisfaction. Why? Because I understood my true nature, and now I can navigate in nature, as my secondary nature, as my apparent nature, but holding my knowledge in respect to my true nature, and that offsets most of all afflictions which are inherent to the jiva, as long as he's fully identified in the body-mind as the body-mind. So, is that clear? I know that you are not doing a very good face, David. Maybe you could contemplate a little bit on that, and do some work, and then present your question for me, and then we can talk more on next Thursday. And how about for the rest of us? Was it clear in respect to the last thing we covered? Yeah, the difference between limitlessness as the nature of the self, and the experience of joy and happiness instituted, which is the translation of the nature as limitlessness, the nature of the Jiva-Atma. Once the Jiva-Atma has this clear, solid, and doubtless self-knowledge, and then he leaves from that platform, from that perspective of identity as the self, my true fundamental free nature, and then it offsets most of all troubles and afflictions and anxieties or frustrations and so on of the experience for most samsara jivas. Okay, the following verse, a single child's voice, for example, a single child's voice singing in a chorus is drowned by the simultaneous voice of all other children. So we have a how you say chorus, huh? And we have so many children, and we go there, I want to listen to my child, but then there are hundreds of other children as well. And then I don't hear my child very clearly, I just hear everything together, So a child's voice singing a short it disappears, it's covered, it's concealed by the voice of all other children. You understand it? It gets concealed. So likewise, the bliss of the self is easily concealed, is easily obscured by all the small little bliss that we experiencing when we gain or attain our desired objects. We keep searching for this happiness by the means of objects, indirectly trying to get this happiness. And then what happens? The true happiness is of the self, but we are extroverted, and furthermore, we are gaining a little bit of joy here, a little bit of joy here, a little bit of joy there, and we miss the very source of joy, which is one's very, very nature. The bliss of the self is likewise easily obscured by the daily small bliss occurring when desired objects are attained. Okay, so it becomes a distraction, and we begin settling for a little satisfaction here, a little satisfaction there, and then when you see you are totally extroverted, and you are missing the source of satisfaction and peace, which is the very nature of the Jiva-Atma. We have partial knowledge because there are obstacles to full knowledge. Partial knowledge, a partial knowledge is a knowledge which is obstacled by certain doubts, or misconceptions, or misunderstandings, or suspiciousness in regards to certain declarations of the Upanishads, or lack of qualification, or lack of trust, Shraddha. There are many reasons why we may have some obstructions to our fully understanding and knowledge and appreciation of our limitless nature. Okay, so this brings about partial knowledge. So I'm working on this. I'm doing this work with Vedanta, but yet there are some obstacles. So the true self-knowledge, the direct and immediate and obstacle-free or obstruction-free knowledge is called aparoksha jnana, which literally means a knowledge in respect to your own self, free from obstruction. There is no obstacles. There is nothing really in between. It's clear, all doubts, all suspicions, all lacks of qualifications, and so on. The obstacles to this clear knowledge is an unnecessary, active, and or exceeding dull mind. So now this commentary is expressing that an example of an obstacle to clear knowledge is excess of rajas and tamas. So when we have too many rajas, we live a super active, stressful, lifestyle. And then, of course, our mind ends up being, most of the time running to gain and accomplish things and experience all these small blisses, here and there. And somehow it's missing out on its very source of bliss. So extreme desire or excessive tamas, which paralyzes the mind and makes the mind afraid of going and play and searching and seeking and enjoy. So either of these two energies, when they dominate the mind becomes unfit for this self-inquiry. It's either too dual or too active or too rajasic or tamasic. The obstruction can be in the form of deluded emotions such as fear. When these extreme desires are obstructed, as we know, we can either experience depression, fear, or anger, frustration, anger, desire, jealous, all these negative, uncomfortable human emotions. They are called samsara. They are the very definition of samsara. Now this desire to have a resolved mind by the means of achieving and gaining and retaining and so on. So we have all of these descriptions, of obstacles, obstacles to our full appreciation of our nature, understanding and assimilation, the retention of this knowledge before we can fully appreciate it. So it can be in different shapes and forms, but that's how we're experiencing our obstacles, In either case, the attention does not go to the reflection of the self in the subtle body, the source of experiential bliss, and hence onward to the self itself, because the belief that the objects are the source of the bliss distract the self. So we are doing the search. The mind is distracted towards the objects and the ignorance, rajas and tamas, that projects value on the objects, and then we're running all the time, and we are missing this source of experiential bliss. And this source of experiential bliss is present here, most probably by Ramji, as the clear reflection of the self in the subtle body. But I want to bring another point here, that there is an element of experiential bliss, regardless of the condition of the reflecting apparatus. If the subtle body is very sattvic, it's going to produce a very sattvic reflection of consciousness, and that is often associated or referred as an experience of satisfaction, peace, and bliss. And you are happy, because the mind is quiet. The mind is free from rajas and tamas, excess of rajas and tamas, and then there is this sense of satisfaction. But what I like to point out here is that, because I don't want us to believe that we have to now live our lives trying to pay attention to the reflection of consciousness on the sattvic subtle body, No, we have the possibility of enjoying this experiential bliss by the means of knowledge and understanding you know, because if we know, and if this knowledge is clear and it's doubt-free, and then we know that I am consciousness, and consciousness is shining in my intellect at all times, regardless of the condition, my mental condition, regardless of the proportions of the three gunas on my subtle body, okay, which is going to produce a reflection called my mind at this point in time. So at any time, if this knowledge is clear, it is properly assimilated and retained, and then the yoni had the opportunity of enjoying the sense of peace and satisfaction, regardless of its mental state, okay? It does not necessary. So, but once we have the self-knowledge, then of course the mind is no longer distracted in the world of object, trying to extract some bliss here and there. It's enjoying its very source of bliss by the means of knowledge. You can enjoy this sense of satisfaction by the means of yoga, you know, capturing the clear reflection of the original consciousness in your sattvic mind, or you can do it by the means of knowledge, by knowing that regardless of your mental condition, I am this self shining in this intellect. Just imagine someone like Swami Shimayananda, extremely rajasic. If you see his videos, his leg does not even stop. It keeps doing like that, you know. So he used to work 15, 18 hours a day, very little sleep, and accomplish so many things. Extremely rajasic, but extremely sattvic as well, and brilliant. Just imagine if his bliss and peace and satisfaction would be tied or dependent on have a very sattvic meditative mind. So he would be the most unenlightened person, let's say, because his mind is active. You understand? But why he was blissful? Because of Yana, you know? He's blissful because his mind was resolved by the means of knowledge, which gives this experiential sense of satisfaction and peace, regardless of the proportions of the three gunas operating in the mind. You understand? So he's blissful and he's active. There is nothing wrong with it. You understand? That's the difference between knowledge and experience. When we get what we want to, we do not know that we are just experience the fullness of our own self at that very moment. How nice. This is something we need to dive and understand very clearly. When we have our accomplishments, when we really get our object of desires, you understand? We think that we have experienced happiness because of the object, but in that very moment, we experience the fullness of my very nature. Why? Why? Because in that moment, when I really get what I want, in that very moment, my mind is resolved indirectly by the means of achieving my goal, by the means of getting what I want. The mind can be resolved by the means of chasing and getting and accomplishing, can be resolved by the means of yoga, controlling, discipline, okay, developing sattva, and can be resolved by the means of understanding, knowledge, jnana, okay? So when we have a samsaric active lifestyle and we get what we want, the mind is momentarily resolved. In that moment, we think that, oh my God, this new house, this new car, this new relationship, but we are not experiencing happiness coming from the object of achievement, of accomplishment. We experience the happiness which is our very nature, because in that moment, the mind is free from excess of rajas, go and get it, or tamas, you know, depression, understand? So those two energies, rajas and tamas, they are the ones, you know, covering or concealing our nature as joy, peace, and happiness. They are extroverting and depressing the mind and making the mind unable to recognize its very source of joy, peace, and happiness. So when we get what we want in that very moment, we experience the fullness of our very self. We are not experiencing the happiness of the object. We experience the happiness of our very self. But because we are fixated on the object, it seems that the object is the cause of my happiness. It seems that the happiness is coming from the object, but the happiness is coming from my mind that becomes very reflective. Why? Because in that moment, there are no vasanas, compelling, binding, desires and fears operating. If those energies are not operating, my mind becomes a nice reflector. When the mind becomes a very reflecting apparatus, and then we experience this beautiful reflection, full reflection of the self, and that is the experience of bliss and satisfaction we have. And we experience what? The reflection which is inherent to our true nature, not by to the nature of the object. The objects are value neutral, as Ramji likes to say. Okay, I experience every joy, every happiness. I experience the happiness of my very self in that very moment when my heart, my mind is free of this need to attract and gain or avoid, and this all these afflictions and all this mental emotional affliction. Consequently, a longing for another experience develops once the blissful experience starts to fade. So when we have this experience with objects and we don't realize, every time we get happy is an opportunity to realize, to investigate, to realize where is this happiness coming from. If we don't understand it because we were not educated, nobody teach these things to the kids in the school when we are small. If we were taught those things, and then it would be easy for us to figure it out. Okay, but because nobody's taught those things except in the Gurukulas, in the Vedanta circle, so we're going to be believing, the bliss came from the object, and then the moment that satisfaction starts fading. Why is satisfaction start fading? Because the causal body begins presenting its next desire, or its next aversion, or whatever. The next desires are coming, okay? And then these very desires, these likes and dislikes, are going to disturb that resolved mind, and that feeling of satisfaction begins fading. Consequently, a longing for another object of desire develops. Of course, okay, now it's coming down, so let me go and order a chocolate cake with a nice cappuccino, something like that. I cannot let it go down. I have to do something to bring it up again. You understand? This desire agitates the mind and again obscures the always experienced bliss of one's nature as limitless, non-dual conscious awareness. That's how we get trapped in samsara. This cosmic universal ignorance, that deceives all of us. David, did it make more sense now? Did you understand how we get trapped? Did you understand that when we are happy, we are happy because happiness is our nature?
Yeah, that to me is the whole point, is that we're constantly getting trapped. We cannot reside in, as long as we're if we're experiencing, we can't reside in Satchitananda. I mean, we can know it, but we can't reside. How do we reside in it? Because it's temporary.
You reside in your true nature by the means of knowledge. You understand? You still interact with the meet world, because your secondary nature as a jiva does not disappear with self-knowledge. You are going to be called to respond to the stimulus coming from the field according to your swadharma, your roles in life. So you do that, but you do that from the perspective, from the angle, from the, of your understanding of your true nature as limitless consciousness, your primary superior nature. And then you transact in the world through what? Through your secondary nature as the body-mind complex. When you do that in nature, but to the extent that you transact in the field of experience, holding this knowledge, and this knowledge is clear, is doubtless, and it's always present. If you have this knowledge, and then the way you're going to interact is going to propitiate this experiential satisfaction, happiness, and peace, which is a function of self-knowledge, not a function of controlling your mind to turn it sattvic, or it's not a byproduct of getting your objects of desires in the field. You continue doing what you do in the world, David, but you don't rely on the world for your satisfaction and your happiness. You know that it's not reliable, okay? Because one, the world is always changing, and your state of mind is always changing. And then how can you believe that you're going to hold a constant feeling or experience of limitlessness and happiness? It's impossible. The world, the condition of the field is changing, and my mental condition is changing, everything changes. So now you want to live in this changing world from the standpoint of your changeless nature. Therefore, you can experience the reflection of this limitless nature as peace and satisfaction, because you understood your primary, fundamental, free and independent nature as consciousness. You understand? There is no contradiction between Satya and Mithya. Okay? So do some more work on this, and then maybe, if you wish, we can talk more about that this coming Thursday.
That's good. I mean, I like the transaction. Live and transact with the world, but from that perspective, which that's that word transaction, or how you transact, interact with the world. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and it's very simple. We were designed, jivas were designed to respond, to interact, okay, to act and to grow in this interaction with the world, okay? In the beginning, we are totally ignorant, and we are moved by vasanas. Slowly we grow, but yet we were designed to do that. Once the self-knowledge is gained, the agent who is designed to act, to respond to the stimulus coming from the field, it does not disappear, it continues doing that, okay? But it no longer does that, for the sake of squeezing and extracting happiness from objects of experience, because now he understood the true source of happiness is his very nature, and that is only possible by the means of jnana, self-knowledge. You understand? Doubtless, clear, hard and fast knowledge in respect to one's true fundamental, free, independent nature as consciousness, that which infuse the body-mind complex with life, so that the body-mind becomes a knower of this field, this projection created by the Lord Ishvara, you understand? Okay, let's see the next verse. Experience of everyday objects leads to the conclusion that they are self-existent and self-revealing, meaning to say they are real. They have an existence of their own. They have a light of their own that they reveal themselves by themselves. They exist by themselves. Every experience in day-to-day life, leads us to this mistaken conclusion. An abstraction like blindness prevents an appreciation of the self-existence and self-revelation of objects. So this is a very nice analogy. I have seen it in other in other Vedantic texts as well. We have an abstraction like blindness, and then we have the objects there, and a simple abstraction is going to challenge, the reality of those objects for the blind person. The blind person is say, okay, no, now I cannot testify to the fact of the chair anymore, because I don't see the chair or the tree. You understand? So a simple abstraction like blindness is going to prevent, the self-existence and the self-revelation of the objects. So what is trying to say? He's trying to say that there are other levels of obstructions that prevents us to understand, first in this context, that the objects, the object that you experience do not have a self-light, a self-existence. They don't reveal themselves. They don't exist by themselves. There are certain obstructions, a kind of blindness, which is a spiritual blindness that makes us to believe, that the objects are real and they shine with existence and they shine revealing themselves with light. And we miss out on the fact that the only self-revealing, self-existing principle is the consciousness of the knower. You understand? It's a kind of spiritual blindness. The same way a physical blindness would obstruct us from testify the existence of certain object. So this spiritual blindness obstructs us in understanding that the only revealing, self-shining, self-existence principle is my consciousness as the knower, that which illumines and reveals all objects of experience, okay? Everything is revealed by the self, in the light of consciousness. Everything exists within consciousness, awareness, okay? And not the other way around. An abstraction is something that hides clear knowledge or brings about wrong knowledge. An abstraction sometimes, oh, no, I got it, I understood, I know, okay? But as we know, sometimes we believe that the snake is a robe, the same way we may believe that the robe is a snake. So an abstraction means rajas and tamas that sometimes projects and sometimes conceals. Right? So an abstraction is something that hides clear vision or brings about, mistakes. Wrong knowledge, okay? I don't see the object, or I'm not sure exactly whether it is a snake or a rope. Owing to some obstacle, atheists say there is no God, even though God is always physically present, because God is everything that is. So the same thing, another kind of blindness, the atheists, the materialist people, they are going to say, no, show me God, unless I can touch, feel, smell, and taste, So what kind of God is that cannot be put to the proof, okay? So this is a kind of obstacle. The mind is very tamasic, okay? It wants to see reality as physicality. It does not understand that even love exists and it cannot be touched, felt, smelled, tasted, but yet we know love exists, for example, the feeling of love, compassion. So an abstraction is something that hides. I don't see the object. Only to these sorts of obstacles, atheists say that there is no God, even though God is physically all the time available as manifest as the universe. It requires a very subtle, spiritually developed mind to see God in everything, even in the inert objects. There is a beautiful sense of God. I remember there was a time I was going often to California, Northern California, in Mount Shasta. And next to Mount Shasta, there was a small mountain that was very rocky. it was a small volcanic mountain. And every time I used to pass there, the highway used to pass right by it, you know, by the side by side, like, you know, and every time I would see that small mountain, I would be in such a state, you know, there was just a feeling like, oh, you know, peace and wonder, you know, and beauty and reverence to that little thing. Later on, one of the guys who belonged to that area, there was a small sangha there that I ended up participating for a short period of time. He knew a lot about geology and archaeology and things like that. And he told me how old Mount Shasta was and how old that small mountain was. This small mountain was 3-4 times older than Mount Shasta, you understand? It was so ancient, but so many millions or billions, I don't remember, you know, of years, okay? Archaeologically proved, geological, archaeologically proved. So even inert object, for someone with a spiritual mind, there is nothing more inert than minerals, you know, rock, right? But even that can be seen by a sensible mind, can be seen as God, you know, beautiful symbol of eternity, present there for billions of years, you know, and you think about that and say, oh my God, now I understand why every time I come here, I feel like stopping the car and stare at this little thing, you know. Why? Because it's beautiful, it's God, you know. So atheists cannot see God. God is all the time present in living, moving creatures and even inert object. Because we do not appreciate the self, we think that the objects exist on their own and that they reveal themselves, but they are generated by ignorance, Maya, and more we will see in our next class, next Monday. Ishwara willing, of course. Okay, so is everything all right? Okie doke. We meet again next Thursday. For those of you coming next Thursday, otherwise next Monday. And thank you again. I appreciate your participation. I appreciate big time your donations and contributions. They are very, very important to me at this point, you know, and I indeed appreciate that. And we see again, we meet again. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone, my friends. Much love. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Thank you, Arlinda. Goodbye.
Thank you, bye-bye. Thank you, thank you.